are not happy with Harley-Davidson, and I wouldn't be either.
Harley-Davidson built its name on premium bikes, but behind the scenes, buyers say they've been stuck with sky-high prices, risky credit terms, and fine print that only worked in the company's favor. Now, those same buyers that once paid without complaining are pushing back, and Harley-Davidson is feeling the pressure. With inventory piling up and dealers desperately sounding the alarm, the once dominant brand may be on the verge of a major shakeup. And what happens next could shock the motorcycle industry. Harley-Davidson dealerships have managed to pull off a subtle trick that most riders never even knew about. In case you never noticed, here's how these dealerships managed to hoodwink riders. Initially, they structured their deals in a customer-friendly manner, such that riders would flock to their outlets and buy Harleys in droves. But what if this was never about affordability? With time, they started to change these deals to suit their personal and selfish interests. Prices that would have initially seemed exorbitant gradually started becoming acceptable. Surprisingly, the riders did not complain. Instead, they went on to buy even more Harleys. However, unknown to many, this move by Harley was not driven by chance, and neither was it a result of an industry trend or a shift in market or consumer trends. It was a slow and calculated shift that dealers executed with utmost precision. To understand this better, let's roll back time a few years before the pandemic. If you had some savings and a decent loan, you could walk into a dealership and get yourself a Street 500 for as low as $6,800. But then, as we approached the late 2010s, these prices started soaring rapidly. Surprisingly, this was not due to inflation or increased production costs. Instead, it was because dealers realized riders were actually ready to pay more without complaining. And the harsh reality, Harley-Davidson didn't just raise prices. To make matters worse, the pandemic hit hard and gave dealerships an even better excuse to hike prices. With the pandemic, global supply chains came to a near halt, and the much-needed raw materials never got to manufacturers on time. Dealerships capitalized on all these and claimed they were experiencing high demand and low supply. The result? Market adjustment fees that in turn translated to higher bike prices. They weren't just reacting to the crisis, they had mastered the art of exploiting it. As it turns out, buyers still bought the bikes. The fear of missing out became a pressure tactic. Dealers warned that with the pandemic going on and the supply chains disrupted, failing to buy at that time meant that the buyers could be forced to pay even more later. They followed these threats up with tactics such as displaying just a few bikes on the floor, further selling fear onto the buyers. Suddenly, dealerships turned into high-pressure areas where taking a moment to think or even negotiate to more favorable terms meant potentially losing the chance to purchase one of the few motorcycles available. Shockingly, this move was just a small part of the bigger vision. You see, those prices were never meant to go back down again, even after the pandemic ended. Temporary markup in light of the pandemic was never the ultimate goal. Instead, the objective was to rewire your thinking, to make you believe that parting with more than $25,000 for a base touring Harley-Davidson motorcycle is absolutely normal. And wait until you hear what they did next. It changed everything. By now, the dealerships had buyers right where they wanted them, already convinced that they had no choice but to buy the motorcycles, no matter what price was slapped on them. And now it was time to unleash their next move. High prices weren't even the worst part. Here's the thing. Most riders don't go into a dealership with $30,000 in their pocket ready to pay cash. Instead, the majority finance their bikes. And that's where dealerships really start making money. Not from the bike itself, but from the interest, the loan terms, and how long the buyer has to pay. After the pandemic, when demand for motorcycles surged, dealers began offering long-term financing options to buyers. At first glance, these payment plans didn't seem too bad, especially after breaking them down into monthly amounts. However, they were loaded with high interest rates, extra fees, and clauses that quietly pushed the total price way beyond the sticker tag. In many cases, buyers ended up paying almost double the original price of the Harley. And the dealers didn't stop at that. they also ensured that they stuffed additional fees in the sales sheet. Once a rider asked about a model they wanted to purchase, they were hit with a number of additional fees that ended up racking up an extra $1,000 to $4,000 on the final price tag of the motorcycle. The shocking fact is that if buyers dared reject these terms, dealers would flat out refuse to sell to them. In short, they were left with only two options: purchase the Harley or purchase the Harley. But it didn't take long before buyers started to push back. The manipulation and sky-high prices were getting out of control, and people were fed up. The growing frustration slowly built into a movement so strong that the dealerships never saw it coming. What happened next flipped the industry. The first sign of the buyer's revolution against Harley-Davidson was actually not loud or chaotic. Rather, they just stopped purchasing motorcycles. They paused, walked away. No drama, just silence. But that silence hit the dealers hard, especially since they never saw it coming. Instead of signing up for overpriced bikes and unreasonable credit terms, the riders opted to wait. They were certain of one thing: the dealers weren't in a position to hold their positions for long. During this time, many buyers resorted to the used motorcycle market. Here, they were certain that they could purchase a well-maintained Harley for almost half the cost of a new one and still avoid the additional fees. Eventually, this movement bore fruits and the dealers started to suffer the implications. New Harleys remained in dealerships unsold for months, and sales targets were yet to be met, something that they had not experienced for decades. With time, the dealers started reverting back to the old incentives: zero-interest financing, special deals, and limited-time incentives. But unfortunately, the tide had already turned. Now, riders were more confident and had taken back their bargaining power. To add insult to injury, all this was happening during a tough economic downturn characterized by rising inflation, soaring living costs, and tighter wallets across the board. Now, motorcycles which were once seen as a necessity suddenly started to feel like a luxury. And just like that, whatever little leverage the dealers still had quickly slipped away. And just when things couldn't get worse, the Harleys themselves became the problem. Another aspect that fueled this movement was the fact that Harley-Davidson's motorcycles aren't the simple machines everyone loved riding anymore. Instead, they're overloaded with technology most riders never asked for. From ride modes and Bluetooth dashboards to adaptive cruise control and cornering ABS. Sadly, rather than make the overall ride better, all this tech is making it more complicated and less enjoyable. Worse yet, the more electronics they pack in, the more riders are forced to rely on dealers for everything, including basic fixes. And that dependency is not by accident. It's part of the game aimed at making riders pay more in maintaining their bikes. And that's why so many riders are slowly walking away. A ticking time bomb about to explode if nothing is done. Harley-Davidson is not just a bike or a brand. It's a lifestyle and a strong community. But here's the harsh truth. When people can't afford to buy and maintain the bike due to the soaring prices, the whole culture starts to crumble. And in fact, we're already seeing it. Events that once pulled in massive crowds are looking emptier each passing year. Riding clubs are fizzling out, and fewer young faces are joining the community as they can't afford the bikes. The case is the same for many Harley-Davidson dealerships that now feel more like empty showrooms than thriving hangouts. After all said and done, one thing is evident. The motorcycle industry is hitting a critical moment where it can either evolve and adapt to the changing needs and preferences of riders or slowly disappear into oblivion. Because this is more than just about motorcycles anymore. It's about trust, loyalty, and whether riders feel valued or exploited. If dealerships want to stay in business, they need to completely rethink how they treat riders. That starts with offering bikes that are actually affordable and built to last, ones that people want to ride. In essence, the focus needs to shift back to the ride itself, and more importantly, those shady pricing tactics and sketchy financing deals need to go. If dealers want to earn back trust, they need to be upfront, fair, and respectful. Today's riders are no longer naive and can clearly see through the game.